Why did the room go quiet the moment she stepped into the mess hall? Not the respectful kind of quiet, not the kind that honors rank or service. This was the other kind, the heavy kind. The kind that settles in your chest and makes you suddenly aware of your own breathing. The kind that whispers, "You don't belong here." Lieutenant Arya Cole felt it before she saw it, before she registered the way conversation slowed, before she noticed the way a few heads tilted together, before the first laugh cut short, like someone had been caught saying something they shouldn't. She had learned over years to read a room without looking like she was reading it. Her boots crossed the tile with steady rhythm. Her shoulders stayed relaxed. Her face calm, neutral, professional. Inside, though, something old tightened. She was still in her flight suit. The blue fabric was creased from hours in the cockpit. Her hair was pulled into a low, efficient bun. A thin smear of grease still lingered along her knuckles. She hadn't bothered to wash it off. Not because she forgot, but because part of her didn't care anymore. She had flown recon at dawn. Low altitude, high risk. The kind of flight that leaves your ears ringing long after your feet touch the ground. The kind that makes your hands shake when the adrenaline finally drains. She should have been proud. Instead, she was tired. She picked up a tray. Metal clinked. A cook glanced up, then away too quickly. Someone whispered her name. Someone else whispered something else, too low to hear but not too low to feel. She didn't react. She never did. She moved down the line. Eggs, toast, coffee. Her body went through the motions while her mind replayed the briefing from earlier that morning. They had barely looked at her then, too. She had raised her hand once, offered a quiet observation about the weather window shifting earlier than predicted. The room had hesitated, not long, just long enough for the silence to become noticeable. Then a male voice had repeated her exact words. Everyone had nodded. Everyone had written it down. And no one had looked at her. She took her tray and turned toward the open tables. That's when the voice came. "Hey, pilot." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried authority, a tone that expected attention, a tone that had never been questioned. Sergeant Briggs leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, uniform crisp, boots hooked under the table rung. He had the relaxed confidence of someone who had never once had to prove he deserved to be where he was. A couple of soldiers around him smirked. Arya paused. Slowly she turned. "Yes, Sergeant." Her voice was calm, respectful, even. His eyes slid over her, not with interest but with assessment, like she was equipment, something issued, something replaceable. Didn't know they were letting tattoo models fly surveillance now. A few chuckles escaped around the table. Her jaw tightened just barely. She had a tattoo, most of the base knew it. A dragon inked along her left shoulder and down her upper arm. It curved in elegant lines, wings folded, eyes sharp. Not flashy, not aggressive, just present. She'd gotten it years before, long before this base, long before this uniform, long before she learned how often people tried to define her before she spoke. "It's regulation, Sergeant," she replied quietly, "and so is my certification." "Oh, I'm sure," he said, waving his hand lazily. "Just unexpected, you know, you don't look like our usual kind of asset." Asset. Not pilot, not officer, not teammate. Asset. Something in her chest shifted, not breaking. Not yet. Just moving into a deeper, colder place. "I'll keep that in mind," she said. She turned to leave. "Hey," Briggs added, louder this time. "Don't scratch the paint on the drone out there, all right? Wouldn't want your artwork getting in the way." This time, the laughter didn't even try to hide. Arya walked away. She didn't slam her tray down, didn't snap, didn't turn around. She took 3 controlled steps, found an empty table near the back and sat. Her hands were steady as she wrapped them around her coffee mug. But inside her chest, A quiet pressure began to build. She stared into the dark liquid. Not because she was hurt. Not because she was weak. But because she was tired of swallowing things that weren't meant to be swallowed. She had earned her place here. She had passed the same flight tests, endured the same drills, sat through the same interrogations, the same psych evals, the same survival training. She had crawled out of a burning wreck once. No one knew that. She had held a dying teammate's hand while medics worked. No one knew that either. They only saw the tattoo. They only saw the quiet. They only saw what made them comfortable to judge. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket. A secure notification. She didn't check it yet. She took a slow breath, then another. Across the room, Briggs was still talking, his voice casual, careless, already moving on to something else. He didn't notice the small shift that had just occurred. Didn't know that something in Arya had finally stopped shrinking. Didn't know that the dragon on her shoulder was not decoration. It was a marker, a seal, a symbol that very few in the building could read. And none of them were sitting at that table. She stood up, tray in hand, and walked toward the exit, her posture straight, her face calm, her heartbeat steady. Behind her, laughter faded back into noise. Ahead of her, the hallway opened into silence. And in her pocket, her phone vibrated again. She stopped walking. Because the message waiting for her wasn't routine. It was marked with a clearance level that didn't appear on normal screens. A clearance level she hadn't seen in 2 years. A clearance level that belonged to a world she had been told was buried. A world tied to the dragon. And to the parts of her life no one here knew existed. She slipped the phone out slowly. The screen lit up. 3 words. "We need you." Her breath caught, not in fear. In recognition. Because the base hadn't just underestimated her. It had no idea who it was laughing at. And the silence that followed her into the hallway was about to mean something very different. Why did her hand start shaking the moment the steel door sealed behind her? Not from fear. Not exactly. It was something older than fear, something that had been sleeping inside her since the day she had been told your service is complete and quietly escorted out of a world that officially did not exist. Arya stood alone in the narrow corridor, phone still glowing in her palm. The message hadn't changed. 3 words, no signature, no coordinates, no explanation. "We need you." She stared at it longer than she should have. 2 years. 2 years since the dragon stopped being a symbol and became a secret she wasn't supposed to remember. 2 years since she had been told to go live a normal life. 2 years since she had been reissued, rebranded, and quietly reabsorbed into standard military structure, where her past was erased from official records and her future was politely limited. She slid the phone into her pocket and exhaled slowly. Her boots carried her down the hallway on autopilot. She passed familiar doors, familiar names, familiar ranks. And none of them knew her. That was the part that still felt strange. They saw a pilot. They didn't see what she had been. Didn't see the training compound buried under desert stone. Didn't see the nights without sleep. Didn't see the simulations that broke people who were supposed to be unbreakable. Didn't see the program. Dragon Wing. They didn't even know it had existed. Arya stopped outside her quarters, keyed in, stepped inside, locked the door behind her. The room was quiet, clean, regulation neat. Her helmet sat on the desk, her boots lined perfectly under the bed, her flight jacket hung untouched. Normal. She sat on the edge of the mattress and let her shoulders finally drop. The message still echoed in her head. "We need you." Not "we want," not "we request." Need. Her phone vibrated again. This time, coordinates appeared. A location, a time. Tonight. She closed her eyes. So they weren't asking. Her stomach tightened, not with dread but with memory. Because the last time she had been summoned like this, someone hadn't come home. She stood slowly, moved to the small locker built into the wall and opened it. Behind her issued uniforms and folded gear was a false panel. She pressed in the corner. The panel clicked. Inside was a narrow compartment, not listed on inventory, not recorded anywhere. She reached in and pulled out a sealed black case. Dragon Wing issue. Her hands hesitated for a second before opening it. Inside lay the pieces of a life she had been told to forget. A slim comm band. A matte black sidearm. A folded patch, the same dragon as her tattoo, but this one biting its own tail. And beneath it all, a small silver dog tag. She picked it up. The name etched into it wasn't hers. It belonged to someone she had once trained beside. Someone who had gone down in a night extraction that had never made the news. Her throat tightened. "We need you." She exhaled and slid the tag back into the case. Some things never really end, they just go quiet. She changed quickly, not into anything tactical, just a dark hoodie, jeans, boots. She left her hair down this time, letting it fall across her shoulders, covering the top edge of the dragon ink. Then she slipped out. The base looked different at night. Less voices, less laughter, more shadows, more wind. She walked past parked vehicles, floodlights casting long lines across the pavement. The coordinates led her toward an older maintenance hangar at the far edge of the airfield, a place used more for storage than operations. The closer she got, the quieter it became. No guards. No posted signs. Just a single door with a keypad glowing faint blue. She entered the code that had once been drilled into her muscle memory. The door opened without hesitation. Inside, the hangar lights were dim. Only a few overhead strips were active, illuminating a long concrete floor. A figure stood near the center. Tall, broad-shouldered, hands clasped behind his back. He turned when she stepped in. "Lieutenant Cole," he said calmly. Her jaw tightened. "Not that name," she replied. He gave a faint nod. "Arya then." She stopped several feet away. "Who are you?" "Someone who has been trying to find you for 18 months. Her heart skipped just once. "Why?" "Because what's coming," he said quietly, "is something we weren't supposed to face again." She studied him, the way he stood, the way he spoke, controlled, measured. "Dragon Wing trained." Her voice dropped. "You shut that program down." "We shut the name down." He gestured toward the empty hangar around them. "But the people it trained, we can't shut you down." A long silence stretched between them. Finally she asked, "Who didn't come back?" He didn't answer right away. "That's why we need you." Her hands curled into fists. "You don't get to use them," she said softly. "Not their names, not their memory." His gaze held steady. "We don't want to," he replied. "We want to stop the reason they're about to matter again." She swallowed. "What reason?" He stepped aside. A portable screen flickered to life behind him. Satellite footage filled it. A remote desert facility. Unmarked, heavily guarded. And then zoomed in on a single image. A symbol carved into the outer wall. A dragon. But this one wasn't biting its tail. It was rising. And its wings were spread. Her breath caught. Because that symbol didn't belong to Dragon Wing. It belonged to something darker. Something that had been written off as myth. A counter-program. One that had never been shut down. One that didn't train protectors. It trained ghosts. Her voice barely moved the air. "That's impossible." "We thought so too," he said, Until last week. The room felt suddenly colder. Her past wasn't just knocking. It was standing in front of her, waiting to be reopened. And she knew deep down that if she said yes, she wouldn't just be stepping back into an old role. She'd be walking into something unfinished. Something that had been waiting for her to remember who she really was. Why did her breath feel shallow the moment the satellite image vanished? Not because she was afraid of the desert compound, but because she recognized the silence that followed. It was the same silence that used to fall over the training compound before lights out. The kind that felt heavy, intentional, like something unseen was listening, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Arya crossed her arms slowly. "You shouldn't be showing me this," she said. The man in front of her, Director Hale, as he finally introduced himself, didn't disagree. "That's why we chose you." She let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "Almost." "You chose me because I'm convenient," she replied quietly. "Because my file says I already know how to disappear." Hale studied her for a long second. "No," he said, "we chose you because you didn't break." The words hit differently than she expected. Her gaze flicked away. She remembered faces, remembered names, remembered the ones who didn't make it through the simulations, the endurance trials, the isolation cycles, people who had been brilliant, strong, brave, and still didn't survive the silence. "You think that makes me stronger," she murmured. "It doesn't. It just means I learned how to stay quiet while something inside me changed." Hale didn't interrupt. She looked back up at him. "What happened to the people who wore that symbol?" She gestured toward the frozen image of the rising dragon. Hale inhaled slowly. "They weren't shut down, they were redirected." Her stomach tightened. Redirected where? Off books, into operations that never touched official command. They were used for deniable missions, internal cleansing and containment that didn't require authorization. Her voice dropped. "They became weapons." "Yes. And now? Now they've gone silent, and silence from a ghost program is not peace, it's preparation." Arya stared at the screen again. "How many?" "At least 12 confirmed, possibly more." She closed her eyes briefly. Dragon Wing had been brutal, but it had still believed in lines, boundaries, internal checks. This was something else. "And you think I can just walk in there?" she asked softly. "No," Hale said. "We think you're the only one who can walk out." She felt something shift in her chest. "They were trained to recognize you," he continued. "Your tattoo, your gait, your cadence. Dragon Wing was the baseline template." "You want me to use myself as bait," she said flatly. "We want you to be the key." Silence settled between them. Her fingers brushed unconsciously over the edge of her sleeve, over the dragon ink beneath. A knock echoed faintly from the hangar wall. Another figure entered quietly. A woman, older, calm, eyes that carried a kind of tired clarity. "This is Dr. Morneau," Hale said. "She designed the neural conditioning." Arya's throat tightened. "You told us the conditioning was neutralized." Morneau met her gaze. "We believed it was," she replied gently. "But they altered it. They turned memory suppression into memory locking." Arya's pulse quickened. "What does that mean?" "It means their loyalty isn't to command," Morneau said softly. "It's to each other, to the program, and to a version of the world that no longer exists." A cold realization settled in. "They won't surrender." "No," Morneau said, "and they won't negotiate." Arya stepped back slightly. "And you think I'll reach them?" "We think you'll remind them." The words echoed in her head. She turned away, walking a few steps across the concrete floor, her boots sounding loud in the quiet hangar. Her mind replayed Briggs' laughter in the mess hall, the way people looked through her, the way she had felt smaller in a room she had earned her place in. They had no idea what she was holding back. And now, the part of her she had buried was being summoned again. "You're not asking," she said quietly. "You're preparing." "Yes." She turned back toward them. "If I say no." Hale's expression didn't change. "Then we find someone else. And they won't make it out." "No." She exhaled slowly. "Then don't dress it up," she said. "This isn't about duty, it's about damage control." "Yes." At least he was honest. Her phone vibrated softly in her pocket. Another message. She pulled it out. This one wasn't coordinates. It was a name. A single name that made her breath catch. The name on the dog tag. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "He's alive." Hale nodded once. "And he's inside that facility." The silence that followed felt endless. She closed her eyes. Not because she was afraid, but because she knew. Knew that the part of her that had learned to disappear was already standing up. Already stepping forward. Already saying yes. Even if her mouth hadn't yet. Because some ghosts don't stay buried. And some dragons don't sleep. They wait. Why did her chest ache before the aircraft even lifted off the runway? Not with fear. With the quiet weight of knowing that once she crossed this line again, nothing inside her would return to its old shape. The transport plane hummed around her. Low, constant, almost comforting in the way only machines could be. Arya sat strapped into the narrow seat, her hands resting loosely on her thighs, eyes fixed on the red indicator light above the hatch. Across from her sat two men in unmarked gear. They didn't speak, didn't look at her. They were there to deliver her, not to protect her. No one told her good luck. They just told her the weather window. She stared at the metal floor and let the memories rise without fighting them. The first day of dragon wing training. The silence. The way they took their names and replaced them with numbers. The way you weren't allowed to ask questions, only to observe. She swallowed. Her phone buzzed once. A final, encrypted message from Dr. Morneau. "They will recognize your presence before you ever see them. Don't deny who you are." Not comforting. Just true. The plane shuddered slightly as it began descent. The desert appeared through the small window, endless, pale, and indifferent. Somewhere out there stood the compound. Somewhere inside it stood a man she had once trained beside, a man who was supposed to be dead. She didn't know what she would say to him. Only that silence would no longer be enough. The transport touched down on a dirt strip miles from the facility. No lights, no marked tower, just a waiting vehicle and two figures in desert wraps. She stepped off into dry wind. They drove her the rest of the way without speaking. The compound rose slowly out of the darkness, angular, guarded, deliberately plain. No flags, no signage, just walls. The vehicle stopped. One of the drivers handed her a slim wristband. "Put it on," he said. She did. The gate slid open. They didn't escort her inside. They left her at the threshold. She stepped forward alone. The air inside was cooler, artificial, controlled. A long corridor stretched ahead, lit by recessed ceiling strips. She walked. Each step echoed softly. Halfway down the corridor, she felt it. The shift. The pressure. The awareness. She wasn't alone anymore. A voice came from the shadows ahead. "You took your time." Her breath caught. The figure stepped into the light. Same posture. Same eyes. Different stillness. "Elias," she said quietly. He tilted his head slightly. "Arya." Hearing her name out loud again felt like reopening a sealed room in her chest. "I thought you were dead." So did they, he replied calmly. You let them. They needed to believe it. He studied her, not her uniform, not her hair, but the way she stood, the way she breathed. They sent you because you remember who we were. They sent me because you became something else. A faint smile touched his mouth. Did we? She swallowed. You're not ghosts, she said. You're people. We were, he replied, before we learned what they were willing to erase. She took a slow step closer. What are you doing here, Elias? Building something they can't shut down. And what is that? A place where no one gets to pretend they didn't know. The words settled heavy. You're going to hurt people, she whispered. He didn't deny it. We're going to stop the kind of damage that creates people like us. Her chest tightened. You're becoming what broke us. He watched her carefully. You came alone, he said softly. That means you already understand. She hesitated. Understanding doesn't mean agreeing. He took a step back, gesturing toward the deeper corridor. Come see what they made us into. She followed, not because she trusted him, but because a part of her needed to know. They passed rooms with glass walls. Inside were men and women moving through silent drills. No laughter, no chatter, just motion and control. Faces she half recognized. They're awake, Elias said, fully, no memory locks, no filters. They're dangerous. So were we. She stopped walking. They're hurt, she said. He turned. Pain teaches clarity. She shook her head. Pain teaches fear. Silence stretched between them. You're here to stop us, he said finally. I'm here to remind you, she replied. He searched her face. Then speak. Her throat tightened. She didn't know if words would be enough. But she also knew this was the moment that would decide everything that came next. And the dragon on her shoulder felt warmer beneath her sleeve, as if it had finally woken up. Why did her voice almost fail her when she finally spoke his name again? Not because she had forgotten how to say it, but because saying it meant accepting that the past wasn't finished with either of them. Elias, she said quietly, the sound of his name slipping into the still corridor like a memory that refused to stay buried. You don't have to keep doing this. He didn't answer right away. They stood facing each other, the low hum of the facility threading the silence between them. The faint echo of distant footsteps drifted through the halls, disciplined, synchronized, almost mechanical. The people inside those walls were moving in perfect patterns. Too perfect. You think I chose this? Elias finally asked. You think I woke up one day and decided to become what they were afraid of? Her eyes didn't leave his. No, she said. I think you chose it because you didn't know how to live without a mission. His jaw tightened. You left, he replied. You went back to wearing patches, to flying clean lines in clean skis. You got to pretend. I didn't pretend, she whispered. I tried to survive. He turned away, packing slowly down the corridor. They erased us, he said. Our records, our names. They buried everything we were. And when the nightmares didn't stop, when the silence got too loud, they told us to be grateful. Her chest tightened. I know, she said. I hear the silence too. He stopped walking. But you didn't let it turn you into this, she continued softly. You didn't turn it into something that's going to hurt people who never asked to be part of it. Elias faced her again. They will, he said. Eventually, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but the systems that made us, they never stop. And becoming them will fix that, she asked. His eyes flickered just slightly. I'm not trying to fix it, he replied. I'm trying to make sure it remembers. She took a careful step forward. They will remember you as a weapon, she said, not as the man who carried me out of a burning crash when my leg wouldn't move. His breath hitched just barely. "You remember that," he said. "I remember everything." She raised her sleeve just enough for the edge of the dragon tattoo to show. "This isn't a warning," she said quietly. "It's a reminder. We were trained to protect even when the world didn't know our names." "You still believe that?" he asked. "I believe in not becoming what broke us." The corridor felt smaller. "I can't shut this down," he said finally. "Too many people depend on it now." "Then don't," she replied. "Change it." A faint, almost sad smile crossed his face. "You're asking me to risk everything." "So did they," she said, "and look what it did to us." Silence fell again, heavier this time. Somewhere deeper in the compound, an alarm chimed softly, not urgent, just a reminder, a system checking itself. Elias glanced toward the sound. "They're preparing," he said. "You should leave." "Not yet." He studied her. "You're not here to extract anyone," he said slowly. "You're here to decide." "Yes." He nodded once. "Then come with me." They moved into a larger chamber, circular, dim, screens lining the walls. On the central display, lines of data scrolled steadily. Faces appeared on a side panel. Men, women, quiet, alert. "They're listening," Elias said. "They know you're here." Arya's chest tightened. "Good," she replied. She stepped forward into the center of the room. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "We weren't trained to disappear," she said calmly. "We were trained to protect, and somewhere along the way, someone told us those were the same thing." Faces watched her. They told us silence was strength, but silence only keeps pain alive. Elias watched her carefully. "You're opening wounds," he murmured. "I'm letting them breathe," she replied. A long pause. One of the faces on the screen shifted, a woman with tired eyes, her voice soft. "You left," she said. Arya nodded. "I did." "Why did you come back?" Arya swallowed. "Because you're not broken," she said. "You're just hurting in a place no one taught you how to heal." The woman's gaze faltered. Another voice followed. "We were erased." "So were we," Arya replied, "but we're still here." The room grew very quiet. Elias' jaw tightened. "You can't undo what's been done," he said. "No," she said softly, "but we can decide what we become next." Her phone buzzed faintly in her pocket. A warning. Time was narrowing. She met Elias' eyes. "This doesn't end with a door closing," she said. "It ends with people choosing not to be ghosts anymore." And for the first time since she'd walked into the compound, Elias didn't look certain of anything at all. Why did the air feel heavier just before everything finally changed? Not because alarms were blaring. Not because weapons were raised. But because a room full of people who had been taught to disappear were standing at the edge of remembering who they used to be. The circular chamber held its breath. Faces glowed softly on the surrounding screens, eyes searching, guarded, quietly aching. These weren't soldiers waiting for commands. They were people waiting for permission. Permission to stop carrying something that had been eating them alive. Elias stood beside Arya now, not ahead of her, not behind her. Just beside her. A small change, but a meaningful one. Her phone buzzed again, a final encrypted message. Extraction window closing. She ignored it. She looked at the woman on the screen again, the one whose voice had cracked when she spoke. "What's your name?" Arya asked gently. A pause. "Maris," the woman replied. "How long has it been since someone used it like it mattered?" Arya asked. Maris swallowed. "Years." Arya nodded slowly. "That's how it starts," she said. "Not with rebellion, not with escape, but with being seen again." A quiet murmur rippled through the room. Another face leaned closer to a camera. They'll come for us, someone said. Yes, Arya replied honestly. And when they do, you'll have to decide what kind of people you want to be when they find you. Silence followed. Elias finally spoke. They're asking you to surrender, he said quietly to her. She met his eyes. They're asking you to disappear again, she corrected. He looked down. You were right, he said. I didn't know how to live without a mission. She softened. You still have one, she said, protecting each other without becoming weapons. The room felt different now. Less sharp. Less closed. Elias stepped forward slowly and deactivated one of the inner security loops. A panel slid open with a soft hiss. A path. Not an escape route, a choice. Maris exhaled shakily. You're not going to lead us out, are you? She asked. Arya shook her head. No, she said, you're going to lead yourselves. Her phone buzzed one last time. This is your final window. She typed a single response. Close it. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and felt something inside her settle. Not relief. Resolution. Elias turned toward her. You're staying. I was never really gone, she replied. He nodded once. The first steps began, quiet, hesitant movements as people inside the compound began choosing rooms to open, systems to shut down, routines to loosen. No chaos. Just slow, careful reclaiming. Arya walked back down the corridor alone. Not because she was leaving, but because she was making space for something new to begin without her shadow. When she stepped outside, dawn was breaking over the desert, pale light stretching across sand and stone. The waiting vehicle was still there. She didn't get in. She stood for a long moment, breathing in the cold morning air. The dragon beneath her sleeve felt like it was finally resting. Not sleeping. Resting. She thought of the mess hall, of laughter that hadn't known her, of rooms that had decided who she was before she ever spoke. She would walk back into those spaces, but she would walk indifferent. Not louder, just steadier, because some strength doesn't demand to be seen. It simply refuses to disappear. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.